Hi, and welcome to this event, which we call Data for What? A conversation with policymakers and practitioners on the use of data and evidence on forced displacement. My name is Bjorn Gilsetter. I'm the head of the Joint Data Center on Forced Displacement, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's session. I think one of the things that unite those of us who are watching this video is that we believe in what gets measured gets done, or at least what gets measured gets managed. And today we're dealing with a population that is virtually oftentimes absent from statistics and data, i.e. refugees, IDPs, and stateless people. This is a side event of the Global Data Forum, and it's also one of the events of the Joint Data Center's quarterly seminar series. We have a really nice lineup for today's conversation. We have 4 speakers, a professor based in Nairobi first, then a professor who is based in Eastern DRC, then we'll go to UNHCR headquarters in Geneva, and finally we will go to Washington DC for a colleague from the World Bank. Let's go first to Nairobi. Professor Kangwanja, let me give you the floor to you. You are the chief executive of the Africa Policy Institute, and you are a seasoned advisor to policymakers both in Kenya and more broadly in East Africa and the Horn of Africa. With no further ado, the floor is yours. Over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to thank you for inviting me to this session of the seminar, and I must say that it's a long time since we met, thanks to COVID-19. But I think this is an indication that we are determined to go on despite the epidemic. So we are on high spirits. The last time I visited Copenhagen, I was excited about the focus on data. By that time, I was working as the principal consultant for IGAD on the new regional initiative or response to victims of forced displacement and the host communities. And this is a research undertaking which has been going on since 2017 to monitor the Nairobi Declaration on Somali refugees and returnees to Somalia. And in that process, it is when really I came to see and believe that data is so important and so central to the emerging response to the victims of displacement, including those who are hosting them. Now, therefore, I don't need to get into the definitions, but just to say that, as Edward Deming told us, in God we trust, but all others must bring their data. In other words, it's only at this juncture we can rely on God, but anything else, we need data. It underscores the centrality of data in responding not only to refugees, but to getting our modern society working. Therefore, data is the new oil in the 20th century digital economy, and we cannot ignore that. So in our time, in regard to response to victims of forced migration, is the new turn to development. In other words, the emergence of the humanitarian development nexus. And this has made the need for verifiable and useful data necessary to underpin responses and for all forms of assistance and partnerships emerging in support of victims of displacement. Now, therefore, there are a variety of reasons why you would need data at this level. If you look at the development, humanitarian nexus, and that continuum because of the changes that it has brought into the humanitarian sector. And it's not a surprise for me that we have this partnership between the World Bank, a leading body in generation and use of data, and UNHCR, which for many decades has been involved in generating data and using that data in response to victims of displacement. My experience is largely from the Horn of Africa, arising from my role in the kind of definition of the new response regime, the new regime of responding to victims of forced displacement. But let me say that whereas we have 90% of the displaced people living in the development world, and many of them trapped in protracted displacement situations, the majority of them are in the Horn of Africa. The Horn of Africa has refugees, twice the same number of IDPs, and thousands of returnees in need of assistance for rehabilitation. Second, at least 1 out of every 5 refugees worldwide is in the region. This is something that we found during our previous research last year, which was tabled to the Council of Ministers. Now, so therefore, useful partnerships have emerged involving humanitarian and development actors in order to respond to the refugees. I don't want to go to the history of how this has come out from the 2016 UN processes to date. But what I would want to emphasize is that there are actors in the humanitarian sector, the traditional actors, and 2, from refugees or other victims of displacement to those who are hosting them as host communities. And therefore, even the involvement of governments in this region has become wider. And so to say, even actors who traditionally work with the governments in the development sector have now become actors in the humanitarian sector. Obviously, there are issues of adjusting to this new condition, new situation, but it is something that is coming from the global level. Therefore, it has met with very little resistance to that extent. And therefore, what is happening is that partnerships are being forged in order to replace the uniqueness and the peculiarities of specific, displacement situations across the world. I am familiar with the Horn because this is where, in March 2017, the Nairobi Declaration on Refugees and the returnees was adopted. And that was a partnership not only within the region using using IGAD as a regional mechanism, but also the governments, majority of which are hosting refugees, while others are actually the producers or the generators of the refugees. Now, a number of things were adopted in this that have made data so central to the response to victims of displacement. Among the things that were adopted was what you can call the spirit of seeking durable solutions to refugees, and redefining durable solution from just having them resettled abroad, but enabling them to live in the communities where they are hosted. And that has called for adjustment in terms of the data you generate for refugees in order to be able to incorporate them or integrate them into a number of areas where they will be able to be self-reliant and dependent and useful to their host communities. I would dare to argue that in the region, there is a growing feeling that refugee is no longer a refugee in the generic sense of the term, but is a citizen of the land. These are citizens of their homes, but need to be helped from wherever they are by the government, by civil society, by everybody concerned. Development actors also involved. Now, the Nairobi Declaration and the 4R processes have required a number of things that make data very, very important. One of them is the registration of inclusion of refugees in national registers, or rather national databases. In other words, refugees to be given identities of the countries where they are hosted so that they are able to access certain resources and opportunities. For example, to access jobs, to access resources so that they can get engaged in meaningful employment or businesses. And therefore, we have seen, for example, in the last census in Kenya, refugees being counted as part of the people in Kenya. So the 50 million Kenyans include refugees. You can deduct them if you want to know the exact Kenyans, but the people living in Kenya include refugees, and that was as a result of the census last year. The 2019 census for the first time would include the refugee category as a people living and being catered for within the Republic of Kenya. The same seems to be happening to other countries. I know it is happening in Ethiopia, it's happening in Djibouti, and I had the opportunity of traveling to all those countries in the IGAD region last year and staying for no less than a week, and basically to interact with the various officials and to know the degree of commitment to generating data regarding refugees and their families, whether they are children, they are male, they are female, in order to avail services to them. Obviously, because they have to access resources and do investment, treasuries of government, treasuries in government, our ministries of finance are requiring registration of refugees, not only for the purpose of assistance, but also to understand what kind of income they are getting. And Uganda is leading the region in regard to generation of this kind of data. There has also been need to generate data in the region in regard to education. IGAD adopted a declaration on refugee education in 2017 December, and that also required the integration of refugees into the existing educational system rather than having segregated education. And therefore, it becomes important to know what the numbers of refugees who are accessing education generally, those who are attending tertiary, primary, tertiary, and even university education. And in order to be able to assist these refugees, it becomes necessary to know the level of access. And therefore, we are beginning to see this data generated. I visited Ethiopia, I see they are doing that. In Kenya, they are already getting integrated even at the level of universities. Again, we are seeing refugees getting identity documents like ID cards in order to be able to travel freely wherever they can and without much problem. The data has also become very, very important in terms of the way humanitarian organizations are transferring traditional assistance to refugees. Rather than just distributing them in camp, these are going on electronic data, like mobile phones and so on. In Kenya, we have a system called M-Pesa, which is the money transfer electronically. And refugees now can access their assistance through electronic money transfer, whether it's digital money transfer, wherever they are. And I think this has been very, very helpful during this time of COVID-19, because refugees don't need to crowd in certain centers in order to get their assistance. They can get it wherever they are under the current constraints of COVID-19, and therefore that has basically ameliorated or rather made it easier for refugees to make ends meet. Some of the implementation of the declaration on durable solutions and how it has made data necessary. But I can only emphasize one point, that the major shift that is making this data necessary or important is because of the shift from humanitarian to development. And that nexus essentially means that refugees are not just people who are sitting down to be helped. There are people who are also supposed to be empowered and become self-reliant. In other words, to access all privileges of citizenship. And if they are to do that, we need data. Let me then move to the next question, which is basically how governments and host communities and organizations like UNHCR and World Bank are basically working together, and how data is beginning to become very useful. I want to use a concrete example of what is happening in Kenya specifically, but I can also touch at the regional level from my past experience. First, in Kenya, I attended a meeting organized by World Bank, and I was a speaker because of my historical study of Kakuma refugee camp. And we were launching the report, Kakuma as a marketplace. And what you get from this study, and I'm familiar with Kakuma myself, is a radical shift from the 1990s through the 2000s to the present in terms of what camps are interpreted to be. Camps are no longer areas where refugees are confined so that they cannot mingle with other populations, and therefore they can only be dependent on humanitarian assistance. The transformation and of the conceptualization of refugee, not as a burden, but needs, have meant that national government and local governments have started investing in refugees as a way of assisting local communities. So we have the example. So Kakuma has emerged as one of the major cities in Kenya. It is also emerging as a major market, focused by even local banks like Equity Bank, which has branches in Kakuma. When I was there in 1998 and 2000, there was not a single bank. Today we have a number of banks operating around Kakuma, so to say. So Kakuma has emerged as a marketplace. And you need the data. What was beginning to important is to get the data of who is supplying which services are needed. We had a conference in Nairobi, and we found that even those people who are digging boreholes are around there in order to supply water to the city, because it needs water and it's in a dry area. The mapping of the development needs of the city has begun, and that again requires concrete data. In 2015,
Peter,
yes,
we're gonna have to. I think we can come back to several of these points.
Yes.
But I'd like to give the floor to Professor Bindu. Is there? Do you have a final point that you want to make before we move on?
Yes, just to say that settlements that Karobei, initiatives like the development response to displacement impacts by the World Bank, among others, are beginning to become major investment partnerships between governments, non-governmental organizations, humanitarian organizations that require data. And in conclusion, one can say that the need to deepen collaboration between partnerships, collaboration among partners, require data in order to enable a concerted intervention by all the actors. Thank you very much. Beyond.
Thank you. That's a great introduction to a start to our seminar here. You hit on so many points, and a lot of credit to Kenya and to the other countries in Eastern Africa that are moving to a much more inclusive approach. Before we go to DRC, just want to put up one slide, which I've been really so encouraged by. In a one-pager, this is an infographic from a study that came out, I think, earlier this year. And you get the percentages on how refugees and host communities are faring compared to the national averages. And this data, and this is the feedback that we're getting from including from the governor in Turkana, it's just such powerful data to have for both when you go to treasuries and make your case, but also when you go to development partners and encourage them to program their resources and the best they can. So as a way to target the areas and the parts of this population that really need it. So just wanted to put that up. We'll save it in our library here, and I would really encourage you to have a close look and also to read this study on the Calaway. over to Professor Bindu. Sorry, we got disconnected from you earlier. You're sitting in Goma in Eastern DRC. You have a very prominent and strong CV, and you are working very closely with some of the key development actors in the region, including in setting up a DRC crisis observatory. And you have also been involved in high frequency mobile phone panel survey work, and that I think the audience here would be really curious to hear about. I give you the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for this opportunity. Yes, I had a small problem of internet connection, but right now it's okay. Morning, afternoon to everybody. And I think that's okay. Did you hear me?
Yes, this is working very well. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good. So, as I said, I'm Professor Kennedy, and I'm from the Democratic Republic of Congo. I'm a professor at the Université Libre de Pays de Gralac. This is in Goma. So I was invited to develop the topic on the following topic: data forward, a conversation of policymakers and practitioners on the use of evidence and the data on forced displacement. So this is the case of DRC. So my the outline of my presentation is the following. On the first point, I will present the context of forced displacement population crisis in Eastern DRC. I want more insist on this because almost everybody knows about this. Secondly, I will present the DRC Crisis Observatory, and I'll be more focused on what we are doing right now on the ground, taking two aspects. The first one will be focused on the COVID high-frequency phone panel survey that we are conducting, and the monitoring or among host and the forcibly displaced populations. The second aspect of the DRC Crisis Observatory that I will develop will be on the household forced displacement survey. The third point to be the challenges that we have been facing on conducting this survey and the lessons before presenting the outlook. Now, on the context in which we are working right now, we are in the east of DRC, which is a very, very difficult context. We are working in a very complex context in the east. As we know, since more than 2 decades, my country has been experiencing armed conflicts, and this conflict has displaced millions of population, and this population facing many problems in the context of a country which has fragile institutions. And among the problems that we are facing, remember all those populations that are moving around, population needs support assistance, humanitarian assistance, and we need at the same time to think about the development perspective. So the displacement in this area, it has taken even the side of cross-border displacement. So people are moving within the region. We have not only internal displacement, but we have also those who are going beyond the national borders. So we are working in a concept. We deal with Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, Tanzania, even far to Kenya, people moving within the region. So the study that we are conducting, we've been experiencing specific aspects that we need to share with the audience. So on top of everything, we have seen that since the conflict started, within the conflict, we also experience the problems of health. So different like Ebola crisis, a cholera crisis, and on the top of all of that, the COVID. So with the COVID, so the problems, they become many in the DRC. So in this context that we are now trying to build this observatory crisis to see how we can manage and how we can collect data. So the DRC Crisis Observatory has been created, and we are in the collaboration. So my university, ULPGL, with the Center of Research, we are working in partnership with the World Bank, Poverty and the Equity Group. And we are on the way, and it has been a very good experience working. So the World Bank working with university. And on this, I would like to appreciate the work that Madame Sacha has done. She came, we met, we discussed, and we started. So up to now, we are now at the fourth round of data collection, and it is going very, very well. So the data, the DRC Crisis Observatory that has been created, it helps us to understand the conflict, to understand the reason of the conflict, to understand the causes of the conflict, because in this context of fragility, we need to have the real information at the right time so that we can react, we can act, and try to see which kind of assistance the IDPs need or the displaced population needs within the region. So currently, as I've said, the study is more focused on health and security. But what is needed, we should at least go further, not only be limited to health and security. We are planning to go further than to be limited to health and security. And this could be good if we could just take the population at the wall as a wall, deal with the whole population within the region to see how many people have been displaced and how we deal with their problems. So we should take into account the IDPs and the refugees. And on what we are doing right now, and we do appreciate, is the coordination and the partnership that we have developed with different stakeholders, like the UNHCR. We've been moving together, and the UN OCHA and the other partners to see how we can respond to the needs of these different displaced populations. Okay, so we have been conducting what we call the high frequency COVID monitoring phone panel survey, focusing specifically on the issue relating to health and security. So since we started, we have developed a good partnership with the government. So the universities, I'm saying that the DRC Crisis Observatory, so we have the World Bank, the university, even the government. So we got from the government an extensive database of eligible populations of the ongoing Eastern DRC. So the Social Protection Program of the Democratic Republic of Congo has provided the list of respondents, people who could be called and who could provide information. These are people, vulnerable population, living in the urban and the peri-urban areas. So today, as I mentioned before, we have reached the fourth round of data collection. And I had to share with you some specific experiences. How did we conduct this? So the findings, some of the important findings that have to be mentioned, we can say that most respondents are aware today of COVID. This is clear. However, they do not comply fully with the restriction, such as avoiding crowds, reducing travel. This is one of the critical aspects when we deal with COVID-19. People are not really having a critical look at moving, at the traveling, at being part of strong crowds. Secondly, respondent revenue have decreased a lot since the outbreak of the COVID crisis. So many people are facing problems of revenue. Third, respondents continue employing harmful coping strategies, which are not really appropriate, such as sending children to work, selling productive assets, and further reducing food consumption to deal with the stock. So this is a very troubling situation, a very troubling context in which food security, and we know already that food security is already a problem in DRC. So in the coming month, we are planning to see how we can build strong database to ensure that we could have a comparative study to see if we can just have some data on forcibly displaced populations and the host communities across rounds going forward. So the work of DRC Crisis Observatory is strong enough and it's going well. However, we still need support, and this support, we are getting it, and we still need support by the state and by the state and other partners. So we are now at the present also preparing a household survey on the population residing across Eastern DRC. and a field survey will be carried out. That what we are doing right now, we are doing it in our local languages, so we can make sure that a respondent, they understand well in their local languages, and also to make sure that our enumerators, they have a good understanding of questionnaire, they ask appropriate questions, and they will get good answers. So the high frequency that we are doing right now, phone calls, they are good and a good way to get real information. So what are the things that we are facing, and what are the lessons that we have learned since we started? Today, we have seen that really we have some data on vulnerable population in the Eastern DRC, which is good. However, we still need to adapt our questions to the needs or to the situation of the vulnerable population. So we have two levels of conducting the study. First is during the preparation, and the second, during the phone interview. So during the preparation, we take time to understand what's the questionnaire. We take time to explain more the questionnaire to the researchers, our enumerators, to make sure that they understand and they can ask appropriate questions. During the phone call interview, all vulnerable population are reached through their local languages. It is also challenging to get the trust for them, so that they can participate actively, knowing what is it about the process, knowing what is about the study, the survey, and they give good answers. But also, we do believe that after explaining the questions, after giving more information about the question and what we are looking for, this population, I mean the vulnerable population, they respond, they believe that at the end of the day, they will get answers to their needs, they will be assisted. So these are challenges that we are facing, and make sure that really we are on the track and the people understand what we are doing, and we are getting accurate information, accurate data. The outlook is that today, I can see that the DRC Crisis Observatory, we are now planning to involve not only international organizations in the process to be part of the stakeholders of the cluster, because we have already UNHCR working with us, we have the World Bank, the World Food Program will work also to bring them on track, but also local organizations. So we have targeted the National Commission of Refugees. We have also already targeted other local government, member government from the local government. At the second level, we are also trying to see how local government members can attend our different sessions when we are drafting, we are discussing on the questionnaire, and also share with them the analytical report at the end of data collection, so that they can be informed about what we are doing. They can know the findings and see how they can use them. These are the people who are supposed to use the results of our CV. So using data by local partners, but also using data by international NGOs. And moving forward, we do believe, we have also been asking the government, would like to develop a strong platform, a strong information platform where people can meet, where people can discuss, where we can see what could be the way forward to take into account the needs of these forced displaced populations. But also at the end, we are also planning, or would like to invite the government to make sure that we are implementing the obligations which are contained in the Kampala Convention of 2009. This is the convention dealing with displaced persons within the region. So we would like also to invite the government to implement those obligations. At the end, we would like also to strengthen local administration capacity to deal with forced displacement movement of population, because this is a very specific issue that we should deal with at the local level, not at the national level. So these are the people who are direct in contact with populations at the ground, and they should have strong capacity to respond at the right time to the need of this population. So with all of that, we need to build a strong team of people. So international organizations, local organizations, the local government, and the universities, to make sure that we have accurate information We have accurate data, and then we use them strongly to meet the need of those local population. So building this partnership, the World Bank, universities, and the international institutions, it's a very good experience to solve, or at least to respond to the need of these local, the forced displaced population, and to develop a strong program of this forced displacement within the region. Thank you for your attention, please.
Professor, that was an excellent presentation. Thank you. Thank you so much. Next, we're going to move to Geneva. Kelly Clemens is the UNHCR's Deputy High Commissioner. She's had that role since 2015. Before that, Kelly served as the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State in the Bureau of Population, Refugees and Migration, which is a part of the United States Department of State. She's been posted to a number of different locations around the world, including as Acting Deputy Chief of Mission at the US Embassy in Beirut in 2014. Kelly is also a good friend of the Joint Data Center, and I am so pleased that you are able to join us today, and I hope that you will be comfortable sharing with us some observations on why the kind of data that we're talking about today is important to UNHCR's work. Kelly, over to you.
Thank you so much, Bjorn, and greetings to colleagues. I see a few familiar names behind letters on the screen, so there are old friends, I think, who have tuned in as well, including from my former employer. But Bjorn, indeed, a great friend of the Joint Data Center, and I have to say the two professors have set this discussion up perfectly in terms of both describing some of our key goals in terms of the importance of data and how we use it, particularly at UNHCR and with our many partners, to demonstrate from an evidence-based approach why we need to design programs in a certain way and make key decisions in terms of when we know that resources are scarce, how can we make those resources go as far as possible. And I wanted to frame this in perhaps three different ways, as briefly as I can, in terms of those goals, and give you a couple of examples, perhaps to add to the DRC and Horn of Africa models that the professors used. The first is many of the people on the screen, on this call will know, because you are tracking closely issues of forced displacement. But for us, solutions is a key element and something that was a fundamental basis of the Global Compact on Refugees that was adopted a couple of years ago, and on which basis we're trying to use data and evidence very well in terms of understanding the socioeconomic situation of the forcibly displaced, and not to single out refugees necessarily, but to really focus as well on host communities, because it's our firm view, and I think that the model that Professor Kawaja mentioned in terms of Kakuma and Kalabe is a clear example as to why one needs to include host communities in terms of the type of analysis we need to do to demonstrate impact and to attract investment and real results. And the economic data that both professors outlined just now, the demographic profiles that we use, age, gender distribution, the composition of refugee households, and their access to employment or education are absolutely fundamental when we're talking about those solutions. One of the issues that I think, particularly in the context that Professor Bindu mentioned on DRC, is the importance of household surveys and how necessary it is, in particularly a context like DRC, when things are changing so rapidly, to have timely and up-to-date data to be able to inform those decisions in real time. UNHCR, as you know, actually does these sorts of large surveys around the world quite regularly. It was already mentioned in terms of the Horn of Africa, the Kenya example, but also in Bangladesh, for example, Lebanon and Venezuela in terms of that response. But we also know that we need to improve our data collection standards to become more compatible with international standards. And this is where I think the collaboration that we have with the World Bank is so fundamentally important. This data is being able to allow us collectively to pursue some of those opportunities. And one of the things that the Compact on Refugees really outlines is the need for inclusion, that we don't treat refugees separately. They're part of national development frameworks and plans. And as the professors mentioned, really as part of a community approach, a national approach with the partnerships in a much more varied way than traditionally we have seen in terms of forced displacement. The second is that we need to quantify those needs to be able to make the case for resources and also to be able to demonstrate in terms of impact why it's important. It promotes responsibility sharing within the international community that is fundamental for us to be able to achieve those solutions. And for us, data is really a key to strengthen, as I think has been already articulated, the strong need to link between a humanitarian approach that an organization like ours uses and a development approach that obviously the World Bank and others use, that we need to leverage to be able to find those solutions. One example I might give here, Bjorn, is the example of Jordan, where we undertake an annual household survey that includes 500,000 refugees, and there are 500 different data points that are gathered through that. This is not something obviously we do alone. We do it in great partnership with many on the ground in Jordan, but it's really critical to identify vulnerabilities in 8 different sectors. It has become a foundation for our programming now in the Middle East and in the Syria response in particular. In Jordan, we've used that as a model in other countries. And clearly we've programmed several $billion for the Syrian refugee response with partners, and that kind of data and input and analysis is critically important for us to be able to tailor and be able to put the resources where they're most needed according to what the data tells us. The second point that I would make to colleagues, Bjorn, is the issue of data for protection. Many of you know us. We are a protection agency. That's our raison d'etre in terms of the people that are of concern to this organization. So the delivery on protection is absolutely fundamental for us. And data analysis has always been key for us to know whether or not we're actually achieving our goal. Right now, we know through data analysis and some of the predictive techniques, it's allowed us to anticipate some of the protection risks. This was true, for example, in the 2015, 2016 large movement of people, as we saw, particularly to this continent. But it's also been present in other areas too, and in other big movements of people. One of the things we do is map those hotspots to be able to then put dedicated capacity and dedicated resources in areas to be able to better protect. And the policy example here that I would use is actually related to the pandemic. One of the things that we've done is use data for protection in global emergencies through what we call a protection monitoring story map. And if you don't have the link at your fingertips, perhaps we can put it in the chat function. But it's one thing that we're using to cover, for example, border restrictions and the impacts on access to territory. And how people are not able to achieve solutions because of some of these restrictions. It's been a real critical role for us to use this for evidence-based decisions, the types of approaches we may make to governments, the kind of program injects that we use, all critically important for advocacy. And then the third and final point that I would make in terms of how we use data is related to change, capacity building, and transformation. You know well, but others on the screen may not, UNHCR has been internally embarked on a major transformation with regard to how we manage, collect, analyze, partner with regard to data. Our collaboration with the World Bank, with the Joint Data Center is one element of this. We've tried to achieve a few things through this transformation: better protection, obviously, and solutions first and foremost, which with better measurement and accountability. The way that we can leverage and adapt technology, our connected learning and knowledge base, we want to be collaborative and transparent, and we want to lead really on issues related to data protection and security and ethics. And this has all been fundamental to that. So we have a new service that stood up with a person that I think many of you know. He was last supporting you, Bjorn, in the Joint Data Center of Vocal Schimmel. And this is something that, in terms of how we make this real, not just for the people we serve, but how do we support data in every sense of the organization, including analysis, impact, monitoring, and results. And on the capacity side, really, I think probably the best indication of this, or the example of this, would be the expert group on refugees and IDP statistics. This is an area where I think many on the call will be more familiar than I, where we collaborate under the UN Statistical Commission, and it brings together a whole lot of partners that allows us to take the guidance on how we produce official statistics on forcibly displaced persons, which then becomes a strong basis for evidence-based policy decisions. So I think I would leave it there, Bjorn, in terms of those three elements. There's a lot more to be said about partnership and certainly about other ways that we've used, particularly the good work from academics we've had just before we end this program. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Kelly. I think that was a great overview of the importance of data for you from different angles, and I think I really appreciate that you bring that in, including from the protection angle. I saw the vulnerability assessment framework in Jordan firsthand in January. Mightily impressed by that work, and I'm looking forward to have that replicated in other parts of the world and other settings. Next, we're going to move to Washington to Benu Bidani. Benu is a manager in a global practice in the World Bank called Poverty and Equity. And you are also a good friend of the centers, Benu. I'm really pleased to welcome you to make remarks at the seminar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bjorn, and it was a pleasure to listen to the professors and Kelly, and I learned a lot. So I will focus on maybe 3 points. That seems to be the magic number. One is really talk a little bit about global poverty and really how I think displaced populations and people living in conflict areas may not be adequately captured in these statistics, partly because the data underlying it are not as robust as we would like. The second point is really on to give you some examples of the kinds of work we are doing. And really, I think here, one of the things I would like to highlight is that there's a lot of innovation going on. You know, when the situation is very difficult, it leads to innovation. So I think we are learning along the way. And then the third point is an example of what is happening in Bangladesh, where we're working in partnership with UNHCR, but the local academics and agencies to see how we can pull this together into an ecosystem that really supports policy making and program design to help both the refugees, but also the displaced populations, right? It isn't, as many of you have said, this is about helping people in both, which include both the refugees and the host communities. And this is increasingly important because of this sort of humanitarian development nexus, given that these situations of displacement are so protracted in many cases. So first, on this issue of global poverty, the bank puts out reports every 2 years on the state of global poverty, and the next report, the 2021, is coming out on October 7th, so stay tuned, and really will present a very sobering picture of what is happening to poverty, particularly given the confluence of conflict and COVID, particularly right now, which has had a huge impact on the economic growth and prospects for poverty reduction. So But the one thing we have documented in previous reports is that poverty is becoming more concentrated in fragile contexts, in a sense, right, in conflict areas. And what do you see? You see that really there's a wide prevalence of data deprivation concerning poverty and other dimensions of welfare in conflict situations, right? Whether it's related to institutional capacity and resources to design and implement surveys, or that in many parts of the country, actually, you cannot maybe go to do traditional data collection because of safety concerns or security concerns. So that's one set of issues. Another dimension, and this has been highlighted before, is really the data deprivation, which is the lack of coverage of displaced populations. As Professor Kakwanja highlighted, this is changing, and it's great to hear that the census in Kenya and Djibouti and Ethiopia will now include all the people who live in the country, right? But this has not been the norm. So often developing countries do not include non-nationals in their sampling frames because they're not in the census, for instance, which the census forms the sampling frame for all household surveys that happen over the decades, right? And in fact, therefore, often household surveys don't necessarily capture them. Jordan was one example where, in fact, the household survey did actually capture systematically both internally displaced, captured refugees and the host population in their household survey. But to be more sustainable, this is something that needs to start with the census and household surveys, so the populations of people that are displaced are actually captured well. And it's great to hear, as I said, that this is beginning to change, right? As Professor mentioned, in Kenya, the census now includes the displaced. So, but in the meanwhile, so what have we been doing, right? So there are a range of efforts where we have, in partnership with others, done surveys to actually capture both the displaced population, the refugees, and the host communities, and really try to look at the different, look at the welfare, look at how does an influx of refugees, what impact does it have on the host communities, right? So these questions have been answered in several countries. Surveys were done in Lebanon, Jordan, and Iraq in 2015, 16. More recently, we've done a survey in Bangladesh, in the area in Cox's Bazar, and there's also been work done in Ecuador, in the wake of the Venezuelan crisis. So these are special data collection efforts, but in fact now the core household surveys in several African countries, Uganda, Chad, Niger, and others are also really capturing both populations. And I think this is sort of a first step to really better evidence-based policy making in these countries on welfare. And the survey that was shown in Kenya is really powerful in terms of demonstrating the welfare of the refugees, but also the host community, and how that compares to the national. So I think we need more of this evidence to actually be able to underpin the dialogue based on real information, and not only, sometimes it becomes very anecdotal in a way. So I think this, and the more we build this body of evidence, I think it'll help us to aggregate. So we are hoping over time that, over the next year or so, that we can try and pull this together in a report that tries to pull this evidence together. So So that's some of the efforts that are ongoing, but I want to highlight some innovations that have been taking place. I'll make it quick. Often there's now, it's happening in the COVID, they highlighted in DRC. Really, we are using phone-based surveys much more systematically. We have COVID-related surveys ongoing in over 100 countries. And this kind of innovation can also, I think, allow us to capture the welfare on a more regular basis and an ongoing basis in situations such as, the crisis situations, and having crisis observatories is a very powerful way to be able to respond. So I think that's one sort of innovation with phone-based surveys, etc. But there's also, I think, a wider range of data. We've been using geospatial data to really get better sampling frames. We use that in Lebanon, in Bangladesh, but also really to understand mobility in much more real time, right? So I think that the range of data that's available, each of it comes with different strengths and weaknesses, but as long as you recognize it, I think that's they are still very valuable data sources. So that's really, and we can talk more in the discussion about some of the examples. And then the third is just, I wanted to explain a little bit about what's happening in Bangladesh, which I see as a very nice example of a sort of much more comprehensive approach to an overall data and evidence ecosystem, really. Okay, so they're very much like what they talked about in DRC. There's a plan to do a Cox's Bazar Humanitarian Development Statistics Center, which will be in place, or which, the building blocks are beginning to be put in there. Often, data is collected by different organizations. There's not one place which is a repository of this data and information. So there's a concerted effort to build this statistics data center, which will essentially allow us to underpin the dialogue, so everyone is talking off the same set of data. It'll include a repository of the data, the raw data that's collected, with appropriate standards for quality, harmonization, and anonymization to protect privacy. So that's one thing. The second is really having a Bangladesh refugee research network, which will be really a locally driven, evidence-based policy dialogue network, which will focus on policies and interventions, and will bring together both practitioners and researchers to generate actionable evidence to inform the response and really feed into the policy dialogue. And two other bits, I would say. One is that we are undertaking a growth diagnostic for that area, which will really try and look at the opportunities and constraints to enhancing the welfare of the people living in Cox's Bazar. And this will be really a key input to the strategic policy dialogue. And then finally, an element of rapid learning from the interventions, so that in fact you are really learning and refining your interventions as they take place to lead to better outcomes. So lots of innovations here that can be applied. And I think I just wanted to share this because it's trying to do it in a more comprehensive way to enhance data. And I'm happy to take questions and discuss this further.
Thank you, Benno. I really like this emphasis on innovation, and we have to do things differently. And I think that as one of the silver linings of COVID, it is forcing us to think a little bit differently, and I think some of these innovations will will stay with us also after COVID. These are not just patchworks during this situation, but it's spurring us to use new ways of collecting data, and obviously to use technology. And we're experiencing that firsthand in this seminar. To get 130 or so participants is something that we couldn't have achieved if we had done this face to face. And also the richness of the discussion in the chat is almost overwhelming, I think. There are direct questions for many of you, of the 4 of you who presented here. So I'm actually thinking of using the remaining 9 minutes that we have to really to invite all 4 of you to respond, reflect on the questions that you see in the chat, rather than opening the floor for oral questions. Professor Kagwanja, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, wonderful. Can I invite you to react to what you've heard from? There have been many references to the work that you're doing, and that's going on in Kenya and also in the chat. Can I invite you to respond?
Yes, Bjorn, let me apologize first because I had so many graphics I would like to share, but I'm out of my workstation. So as you can see, I'm in a strange place. It's a hotel. So, but that said, let me also appreciate the many comments that have been made in reference to what I've said. I'll be posting the figures as they have come from the Kenya 2019 survey, registering refugees by age and by sex and all that. I mean, from the census. Census have always their problems, but at least it was the first major step in the region. And as I've said, this is as a result of the 2017 Nairobi Declaration that required that across the region we register refugees, and in terms of their age, their skills, and everything. And that's a major step towards the process of inclusion in the economy, and to enable refugees to begin having self-reliant ways of making a living where they don't have a job. Obviously, beyond if I had time, I would have talked at length about Corbeil settlement in Turkana. Again, another case which can generate valuable information data on the partnership across the partnership between government, national government, county or local, international partners, civil society organizations, and so on. One of the cases we have very strange here in Kenya. We have a culture called Harambee, which is fundraising in order to assist a needy family and needy individual. That is beginning now to apply to refugees, which has not happened the last 5 or so decades. In other words, you can see people getting to a restaurant and doing a fundraiser. Harambee is a fundraiser recently to help a needy person. It was headed by one of the envoy of the UNHCR High Commissioner, who, with other local Kenyans, did a fundraise for education of refugees, among others. So again, that's what we are experiencing here. But as I'm saying, the implementation of IGAD durable solutions declaration is still work in progress. There are challenges here and there, but there are positive things to report on, which bears on the kind of data that is coming from the government. So I'm saying data is beginning has become so important to underpin the multifaceted partnerships that are emerging, arising from the new humanitarian development nexus in response to displacement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Professor Bindu, do we have you back online? I'd love to hear from you, but we try to force. There we go. I see you now.
Okay. Thank you.
Good.
Good. So I have two questions. The first one is about DRCs. That what sample? I've been asked the question saying that what the sample being used and how to use it. So we do have two samples for the phone sample. We do have two samples. So we have for the vulnerable population in urban and the peri-urban areas in the Eastern DRC. For the household forced displacement, so it will be, it is a very representative at the Eastern DRC population in East, with a structure of forcibly displaced population. So we are working in partnership with the government. The government has provided us with a list of different beneficiaries. So from that list, we just drew a number of beneficiaries. We took from a list of 20,000, we just drew 5,000 to make 1,440 calls. So with this sample, it becomes a little bit easy for us to reach the respondent, the real vulnerable population, and to get their answers in the urban and the peri-urban areas. So the sample is very representative, and the government is very helpful in doing this survey with this sample. So the best practices, I've been asked the question saying what could be the best practices that we could share, that could be used or applied elsewhere. I have to, and what are also the pitfalls of our approach, of this approach. I should say that we are on the road. We are still on the road. So, and being on the road, we are still learning. And through this process, we do believe that at the end, we'll be at least capable of saying that this has been the pitfall of this approach and how we could correct it. So we are on the way saying that we still need to build a strong partnership with other organizations, the existing organizations, in the ecosystem, and ensure that we are building an existing work to extend it possible in the ecosystem. So building partnership, being with other organizations will help us to have a strong approach that could be helpful to the vulnerable displaced populations. So really, we are still on the way that we're still learning and help that we could be able to answer appropriately to this question after reaching a certain point.
Thank you very much. I'm gonna, Kelly, if I can ask you, you may have seen in the chat, there are lots of questions around the ethics of data collection and data management. So that's one thing that you might want to address. The other one, which is more of a personal pet peeve that I have, is that we collect all this data and we collect all this evidence, but how do we get it through to the policymakers, those that who make the big decisions? How do we make them listen to the evidence? It's clear that we see during COVID that's a struggle sometimes. Do you have any reflections on that? Any advice for us?
Thanks, Bjorn. Maybe the last question first. Persistence. In terms of the data, the analysis, the empirical, you have to really demonstrate why it's in the interest of the consumer to pay some attention, because either there's a bottom line payoff for that consumer or that entity or that organization, or there's a bit of an incentive that if they go in a particular direction, that there's going to be broader benefit. And I go back actually to even a study before the one that was talked about earlier by the professor in Kenya, to something that the IFC did back 3 or 4 years ago with regard to Kakuma, which demonstrated a straight payoff between investment in hosts, in refugees, in terms of the GDP in per capita per household increase. And this, I don't think, at the time, perhaps when it was initially in concept phase, got as much attention as it did when it was actually completed. And it actually became a foundational piece of work in terms of demonstrating how this new partnership in terms of humanitarian development, this host and refugee frame, all of this could really be the seed of what we would then see in terms of the approach that's outlined in the compact that the professor really brought home as well. So I think, you know, the persistence element is critical, and targeted messaging to those that will need to pay some attention, lest what they're trying to do not work, because the evidence and data speaks otherwise. Yeah, there were a couple of things in terms of the ethics with regard to protection household survey data, and with resources being very scarce in terms of the provision of assistance. Is it really fair to be asking questions of this nature if one can then not follow up immediately with resources in terms of those protection services? And obviously, in an environment where we're working, where the needs vast outstrip the resources available, this is a key issue. But with regard to protection, it's about the individual, but it's also about how we design and our offerings, our programs, or how do we change what we're doing because of what the people we're serving either have expressed or have experienced. So I think, you know, that sort of thing also, I think in terms of the broader frame, is quite important. And then we see, for example, in a place like Jordan, if we go back to that example, that depending upon resources, our ability to be able to expand or to contract the number of households that benefit, for example, from cash-based assistance, to be able to pay rents, school fees, and other, it does vary. It varies obviously in terms of how much we can raise. And the more that we have the evidence to be able to demonstrate what difference it will make if we provide X, Y, or Z, the greater chance we have in terms of being able to use that impact to be able to make the case for additional resources. So I think, you know, in terms of broader benefit for the people we're serving, it is largely in their benefit, obviously, to be included and counted and have their voices heard or their data collected in a safe way, of course. And there was another question in terms of data protection. Obviously, the initiative we have through the Joint Data Center with this microdata library is designed to try to make data available as a public good, with the data protections about individual information, all of that very carefully crafted and considered before, in fact, we offer that data to the broader community, including researchers who can help us make the case in terms of empirical data. But there's a very strong undergird foundation in terms of data protection that we use. And the issues, I think there was one final question about big data. And in this case, I think we've done some very interesting work using AI and big data to try to predict population movements using a number of different tools. Mobile phone usage is one of those, but also other key indicators, the number of livestock purchased in a particular area or sold in a particular area, being able to demonstrate climatic changes in addition to potential conflict drivers. There are an enormous number of potential uses of big data that we are using and can continue to use to better target some of the program interventions that we use. Thanks, Bjorn.
Thank you, Kelly. You hit on a lot of points, great points. Let me just emphasize what you mentioned about data access and making data available, and the recognition that to do that well is an investment. It's a costly investment, and it has to be very conscious. And that is part of the mandate of the JDC to support both the bank, but primarily UNHCR to increase your resources to do that. And we're grateful to the sponsors of the data center, the Danish government, the US government, the State Department, and in the EU through DevCo, who are providing us with the resources to be able to support and fund this work within UNHCR. So, great. The other point I wanted to pick up before I turn to Bennu for to close this is on ethics. It's clear from this conversation that that is a key topic that we need to spend more time on, I think. We will not do it justice today, obviously, but I can foresee that this will be a topic for a future conversation or workshop in the months to come. We've heard the message loud and clear from this conversation also. Thank you, Kelly. Benno, no, I'm not asking you to summarize what we have heard, but just to give you an opportunity to reflect on what you have heard personally, and if there are questions that you feel are specifically for you, and then we're going to wrap up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. No, I just to maybe highlight a couple of points which I sort of heard and would like to. I think your point about how do we use data and evidence to affect change and influence policy and program design and really make a difference in the lives of people ultimately. That is a really important one, and I think it has many parts of it, and there's clearly but just one aspect of that clearly is that the data should be available in a safe way, appropriately protected, so that in fact it is available to researchers, to anybody, to actually generate more evidence and debate about different policy questions. I think partnerships are an important aspect of it. Sometimes partnering with governments, with local academics from the beginning, so they buy into the whole process is actually, I think, really important, because then it's hard to walk away from results you don't like if you've been very much a partner in that entire journey, and you start the journey with perhaps a few expectations of what the outcome is. Sometimes what I find is that it's really, the messages. So I think the partnership aspect, the more we can do that, I think that then there's a collective ownership of what we learn on the evidence side, and then I think how to take that forward will be a much easier part of the story. And then I think the third part is really investing in documenting and showcasing and what the results have been of these efforts, and trying to, and perhaps that's a role with the Joint Data Center, and we can do is really trying to see if at all, what does that tell us together as a body of work too, when there's enough. So I think we are reaching that point in the sense that we have examples of in many different contexts, whether it's in Africa, we even have information on, Greece and Italy and what happened with the influx of refugees there. So perhaps, also being able to sit back and look at this overall body of work can help on the global scene maybe also, and try and see if there are some common messages and lessons learned. So perhaps it's about the data, it's about partnerships, and it's about telling the story, both the successes, the challenges, and what we learn from it. I'll stop there.
Thank you. You're giving me a cue to a public resource out there. We have in a library, which you will find on the Joint Data Center's website, some 350, 370 half to one page summaries of academic articles and major research reports from around the world on many topics related to forced displacement and data. So there is indeed a growing body of evidence, and we are working hard to stimulate even more work by the academic community, to not least on socioeconomic consequences of being forcibly displaced. Very well, we are way over time, and Appreciate your attention and your patience today. And we have taken note of the chat, the many questions. I hope that you feel that you've got response to many of them. But this is not the end of the conversation, and there will be more seminar series, and we hope to be able to pick up on some of the suggestions that we saw here. Many thanks to the 4 presenters. Great job. Really appreciate you taking the time and sharing your experience. With that, let me close it out and wish you a good rest of the day. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.